Hello, I'm Catherine Weatherburn, the founder of Safetyknot, and we work with construction companies and organisations who have elements of construction in their projects. And we do this with an aim to promote safety and to prevent injury. In this video, we're going to discuss safe practices for loading and unloading of vehicles. This is because there are many hazards associated with moving vehicles, particularly when manoeuvring or reversing. And actually, being hit by a moving vehicle is one of the most common injuries that happens on a construction site. The Health and Safety Executive in the UK, or the HSE, reports that in the UK every year an average of 7 workers die as a result of accidents involving vehicles or mobile plant on construction sites, and a further 93 are seriously injured. However, simple steps can often prove effective to prevent these injuries, and in this video we share some examples which have been successfully implemented by our Safetyknot's partner organisations, and they've done so to reduce the number of injuries on construction sites associated with moving vehicles. So our partners stress the importance of making a plan to achieve safer loading and unloading of vehicles. In their experience, that's what's been successful. And our partners have reported that having and implementing such a plan can raise awareness amongst workers. They found that on their work sites, that workers didn't know about the potential hazards or all the potential hazards involved with moving vehicles being present on site, perhaps because it's a very common occurrence, perhaps happening daily. The vehicles do come in and off. So they found that implementing this actually led to a reduction in associated injuries. So what our partner organisations did was they divided their plan into 3 parts, which are preparation, awareness and action. So preparation starts before the vehicle comes onto the construction site. Awareness ensures that everyone, including workers, are involved and aware of the hazards and the control measures that can be taken. And action refers to getting ready to load and unload the vehicle. So let's start by looking at the first part of our partners' plans, which is preparation. So this is before the vehicle even comes onto site. So they said to think about when is the vehicle coming on site? Being mindful of what time of day vehicles come onto the site is important. This is because if there's limited daylight, perhaps it's in the winter or maybe you're working in a context where there's not electricity, then and it's later in the afternoon or the evening, it just makes seeing everything harder, including people. And it also makes vehicles seeing things more difficult. So depending on the context your community works in, there may not be sufficient lighting. So this is why loading and unloading vehicles during daylight hours can increase visibility, which in turn can reduce risk of being hit by a moving vehicle. The next part that they think about is where will the vehicle go? Is there a safe place for the vehicle to stop and manoeuvre, both before it comes onto the site, because they might have to manoeuvre before they're on site, and also when it is on site. It may be that there's not adequate space on site for the vehicle to stop. And if this is the case, and the vehicle will be stopping in the road, for example, in a blind bend or a corner, this really has got the potential to cause a hazard to other road users, and this could result in an RTC or a road traffic collision. A safer location for vehicles to stop, both outside and on the construction site, should be identified prior to the vehicle arriving. Also, warning or alerting others. The idea here is to signal and alert those on the site and around you that there's something they should be aware of. So signs or signage can alert people that there's potential hazards. And using warning signs, so if we think about the vehicle not being able to come onto the site and the vehicles having to stop or manoeuvre on the road, then you could put warning signs such as traffic cones in the road or on the construction site where the vehicle will be stopping. But depending on the context you're working in, there may not be signs available or even road traffic cones or warning triangles. So if this is the case, the community you work with will be able to implement alternatives, such as putting a visibility vest or tabard onto a branch to signal and alert people of potential hazard ahead. Now, this, of course, doesn't identify what the hazard is, but the purpose here is to alert people. So if someone sees a branch with a high-vis jacket or vest on the road, then they're going to be alerted that there's something ahead. Now, the second part of the 3-part plan is awareness. This is to ensure that everyone involved is aware. And the idea here is to make sure that everyone involved is aware that a vehicle is coming on site so that they can be alerted and they can think about the potential associated hazards that might happen, which enable them to decide what appropriate control measures that they want to put in place for themselves to stop themselves from being hit by a vehicle or other associated accidents. So such control measures could include designating traffic controllers and making sure that they're being seen. Also, increasing visibility is another safety control measure that can be implemented. As we said, if it's dark or if there's low lighting, it's quite hard to see. But also when vehicles are moving and maneuvering, it's hard for them to see. So making sure people are visible, bright and seen is really important. Our partner organisations have suggested that having 2 people, so this will depend on the size of your site, to control traffic on the road and also when the vehicle is coming onto the construction site is really helpful. But remember, a full health and safety risk assessment should have been conducted, so these control mechanisms should have been identified. And as I say, you'll know what's best for your site. But our partner organisations stress the importance of these traffic controllers being seen to reduce the risk of being hit by the vehicle. So to achieve this, workers can wear high visibility jackets. But again, you might work in a context where these aren't available, that they're too expensive. So it might be that they have instead access to a visibility vest. So it's not the full jacket, it just doesn't have sleeves or a tabard even. But this can still increase visibility. But to increase visibility further, it could be that if someone's directing traffic, they want to hold a high visibility vest in addition to the one they're wearing in their hand or hands so that they can help to direct traffic and the driver can see their hand directions better, more clearly, so they can see where they're supposed to go. Again, the idea here is to avoid being hit by the vehicle and also to help the vehicle know where they're actually supposed to go. Being heard is really important. So alerting those around you using a noise such as blowing a whistle can be a really useful safety measure to alert both the driver, construction workers, pedestrians, whoever's around, that is something to be aware of. Now, again, a bit like the signal where there was the branch of the tabard in the road, this doesn't tell people what the hazard is, but it's the act of alerting. So the act of blowing a whistle or making a noise doesn't increase safety in any way, but it's alerting people so that they can be aware, so that then they can decide what appropriate action they should take. But again, this should have been identified in the risk assessment. Keeping a safe distance. So your health and safety risk assessment, which should have been conducted, I know that it's not always conducted, but it really should be, can determine what a safe distance is from the vehicle and whether erecting a barrier, for example, or identifying a safe area for workers to wait, particularly if it's a small construction site, until the vehicle comes in and it's stopped, could be considered as a safety control measure. Now, the third part of the plan from our partners is action. So this is when it's time to load or unload the vehicle. You need a signal to tell workers that it's safe to come towards the vehicle and to start to load or unload. And to avoid any confusion, one person only should be in charge of instructing the loading or unloading process. One person should be telling workers what will happen and when, providing clear instructions. So to know that everyone is personally responsible for, so that they have the opportunity to take proper safety control measures. Now, manual handling and lifting of loads can cause injury, so where possible, manual handling should be avoided. If we think of the hierarchy controls, where elimination is at the top, so if someone doesn't have to carry something, that would be best, and PPE is at the bottom. But where manual handling cannot be avoided, a substitution, so we work our way down the hierarchy of controls, such as a wheelbarrow could be used to implement reduce the risk of the associated manual handling, accidents and injury. However, let's be practical, it's not always possible to avoid lifting and carrying by hand. So if this is the case, workers should have hopefully received training and how to lift correctly and safely. In my experience, this isn't always the case. So it can be helpful to have someone in charge who can support workers with this and to provide some tips and advice about how to do that. Recommended weights shouldn't be exceeded, as this can make workers more vulnerable to back injuries and increase their risk of trips, slips and falls. The route that they're using should be clear when they're carrying these loads to reduce the risk of slip, trips and falls. And also, when they are taking the load somewhere, it needs to be stored. So if these items are going to be stored on a construction site, they're not going to be used immediately. We need to make sure that they're stored in a way that doesn't present a hazard. So I've seen construction sites, for example, where a route has been cleared to the storage facility to avoid slips and trips, but then the load has been stored in such a way, for example, it's stacked too high, that this then presents a different hazard. It presents a crush injury risk. So workers should be aware that building materials should not be stacked more than 1 metre high to avoid the stack falling over and risking injuring someone and causing, as I said, a crush injury. And when thinking about removing or reducing hazards, we want to make sure that the act of doing so doesn't result in creating a new hazard. So, for example, when unloading materials, we want to make sure that we're not blocking access or escape routes. And materials should always be stored out of the way of the busy part or the working part of the construction site. And it could be considered whether erecting a barrier is necessary if there's not a storeroom. If, however, you are storing materials in a storeroom, this should be padlocked. Make sure that people don't enter it when in use. And because unfortunately, as we know, construction sites are attractive to children who might come on the site to play. So we need to make sure that that is secured so that children, if they do access the site, cannot access that. Now, I hope that you found this video useful and that we've been able to share some insight from some of our partner organisations that we've worked with about having a plan to prevent associated accidents and injuries from moving vehicles and when loading and unloading vehicles.